Hey everyone, welcome back to the Ham Radio Insights YouTube channel. My name is Stuart Victor Echo 9 Charlie Foxtrot, and today I'm very honored. It's a privilege to have the one of the guys I hear all the time, every major contest, usually hanging out at the bottom of each band, usually around 14,153. I hear K3LR, and Tim Duffy has joined us today to talk about contesting and entering into the world of contesting for new hams. What is contesting? What do you have to know? And Tim's going to hopefully share some golden nuggets of information with us today. But Tim, welcome to the program. It's an honor to have you here today.
Well, thanks so much for asking me to join your program, Stuart. It's a real honor.
And so, Tim, I've heard K3LR on every single contest. I think I've probably got at least a good 50 or 60 contest QSOs with you folks on almost every band. Tell us about your journey in ham radio, how you got started, and to where you're at today. Obviously it's going to be a very detailed resume, but let's focus on the key points.
Yeah, so I've been in amateur radio for 54 years. It is my one and only hobby. I got started when I was 12 years old, and by the time I was 14, I was extra class here in the U.S., so had the top license, and traded in my 2x3 call sign in 1977 for K3LR, and we were off and running. And the first contest was Field Day in June of 1972, and when I saw that, I said, I have found my home. And I've been a contester ever since, and we currently have 14 towers here at K3LR, 11 operating positions, and one of the largest stations in the world. So, and now CEO of DX Engineering.
And if you look behind me there, we got lots of DX Engineering products sitting on the shack there. Tim, do you do any casual like DXing or just rag chewing? Or is it just purely contesting now?
No, so I do try to get on every day, Stuart, whether it be on CW or sideband. I try to get on, I was on 2 Meters FM last night, checking into the local net. Yeah, I try to get on every day and make a QSO, and you have to use the bands to keep them. So I'm a big proponent of activity.
And I noticed, to talk about activity, there's been a ton of activity in the DX expedition world right now, which I know DX Engineering has a lot to do from sponsorship levels here with the CY0 guys out there. We just finished with 3Y0K. There's numerous expeditions going on right now. So that's good to see that type of activity happening on the band right now.
It is. It's great. The Sable Island guys are doing a tremendous job. I worked them on 160 meters last night. I'm really, really excited about the youth expedition that is over in Bangladesh. The DX Engineering is sponsoring, and that's led by Philip, DK6 Sierra Papa, and he's got 3 of his buddies with them on the team, and they are getting set up, and really a fascinating D-expedition, but all done with youth operators.
Yeah, I think I've seen them on the cluster earlier this afternoon, so it's good to see them on there. I know I think they were starting up today. Today is operations day number 1. So excellent. So Tim, I know we want to talk about contesting. I mean, there's all kinds of contests out there, from QSO parties to national ones like we have in Canada with the RAC Winter in Canada contest. This weekend is the Russian contest. And then in a week and a half time, we have one of the big ones, the WPX contest, which I'll be on as Charlie Golf 9 Tango, so very special prefix for that one. I like to collect special event calls, and it just happened to coincide them with big contests. So, so Tim, we talked about all the different levels. I think those are the 3 levels: QSO parties, national contests, and then the international big ones. If I'm a new ham radio operator, maybe I'm doing Parks on the Air or something like that, and I want to dip my toe into the world of contesting, where should I start, and how do I start?
Yeah, so there's a couple of really good resources, Stuart. I recommend the State QSO parties is a great place to start, because it's a little bit more laid back, although there's some very serious operations, especially the mobile guys in that. But it's a lot like Parks on the Air. You get on and you can either call CQ, or you can just tune around and do what we call search and pounce, so that you're just calling other stations that are calling CQ. a really good, there's two really good resources. Number one is contestcalendar.com. That is a site hosted by WA7 Bravo Norway Mike, and he keeps up to date on all the contest activities that go on every day. And there literally are contests going on every day. And some of them are large international ones, like you pointed out. Some are the smaller ones. The other great resource is contestuniversity.com. That happens to be a project that I have been doing now for 19 years. And so since 2007, we have had contest universities quite literally all over the world: Australia, Russia, Brazil, and most notably here in the US. And we had some virtual ones during COVID. But the resource there is you can go back and see videos and the slide decks for contest universities almost from the beginning. And so a tremendous amount of resource in getting started. There are slide decks there, video presentations that are available, all for free, that you can take a look at to get a primer and see kind of how contesting works.
Mental note made. I never even heard of Contest University. So there you go. I learned something new today. So I've accomplished my goal in life to learn something new every single day. So state QSO parties, I call them Tim, a little bit more casual, laid back, like I said, like a Parks on the Air. Yes, so some guys take them very, very seriously. I had Sebastian Delmont on KI2D, who does a lot of roving in New York for the New York State QSO parties. I find them just a little more chill, I guess is the terminology I would use. So the next one we move up into is like I call them the country contest, like Canada Day, or like this weekend is the Russian DX contest. Those happen almost every weekend as well. Different countries put on their own contest. That's kind of where I like to play in. I kind of skip over the QSO parties and really focus in on the country ones, because not a lot of North American stations will get involved with, say, the Coupe de Ref, which is the French contest, or the Belgian contest. How often do you guys get involved with those ones at K3LR, and any tips that you can share with somebody about those type of contests?
We typically do not get involved with those contests because we have what we call a multi station, which means multiple operators, multiple transmitters. And so staffing a multi will take 12 to 14 operators here at K3LR. And so we only do those during the big international contests. However, when going down to some of the national contests, one of my favorite national contests is the North American QSO Party. And the North American QSO Party happens twice a year, and it is held in January and then also in August. And these are great activity periods where, number one of the biggest attractions is that it is only 12 hours long. Number two, there are no amplifiers. So it's 100 watts only. You cannot run an amplifier in that. And so that means that the QRM level on the bands is less, the stress level is less, and it's just 12 hours. So you don't have to dedicate the entire weekend, and it's a lot of fun because you can work the same station on all 6 bands, and so the rate is really good, the activity level is very good. So that's one example of a North American contest. It's predominantly just North American stations, Canada, the US, and also, if North American countries like Mexico, etc., that are part of it. But it is a really good way to get started. And a lot of people, that's their first application to contesting, Stuart.
Okay, that's good. I mean, I've done the North American QSO Party in the past as well, and I knew about the no amplifier, but thanks for reminding me about that, because that's a very critical point. There's no amplification. So I'll have to leave the ACOM 1010 off for that one.
Right.
You threw around a couple of terminologies there. You mentioned search and pounce. So you have search and pounce, which basically just spinning the dial and finding people calling CQ contest. And then the other terminology we use is running a frequency. Can you describe what that means?
Yeah, so running a frequency is where you camp and set up and call CQ. And it's just like when you call CQ without a contest, you're just CQ contest in this case. So that you're letting people know that you're in the contest and you're looking for other stations to call you. So they will respond to the CQ, and that's how you can work them. The searching and pouncing is where I am spinning the big knob and I'm looking for others that are calling CQ, and or maybe they're running a pileup, but I'm searching and then pouncing on them. Or in the case of if I'm connected to the packet cluster, looking at call outs, which of course are on the internet, maybe I'm clicking and searching and pouncing, and clicking on those spots is another way to make QSOs. So there's two ways: either call CQ or search and pounce.
And normally with search and pounce, what you're really doing there is looking for multipliers. So you see me on at VE9, for example. You need a VE9 on 40 meters. You basically click and go there, or spin the dial to get there, and you give me a call and you work me and you get that multiplier. But multiplier may be a terminology not a lot of people understand. Tim, can you explain what a multiplier is?
Yes. So as you pointed out, VE9 typically is a multiplier. So sometimes multipliers are counties, sometimes they're states, sometimes they're countries. And so the first time, for instance, if I'm located in Europe and I work somebody in the US, and in the particular contest has countries as multipliers, the first QSO on that band, let's say it's 20 meters, with the US would be a multiplier. And then if I work more US stations, I don't get the multiplier again, but I do get more contacts. So what typically happens, and that's why it's important to go to contestcalendar.com, take a look at the rules for the contest so that you know, number one, how to send in your log once it's done. Even if it's a small log, all the contest sponsors would like to have you send in a log, and it's really easy to do on the internet, sending in logs. And then you can see in the rules, well, I take the number of contacts, and each contact is worth 1 point, and then I get to multiply it by the number of countries that I worked. And so you take QSOs times multipliers, countries, and that gives you a score. And so those are some basic fundamentals on scoring within contests. But like I said, every contest is different, and you want to know the rules. So you go to contestcalendar.com, then you can click on the contest, and boom, there are the rules.
And it's very important to understand the rules before you go into a contest, because a lot of contests will say no spotting, or they put, if you want to use spotting assistance, and you go into a different category. So it's very important to understand those rules. And good to, thanks for clarifying the, how the scoring works, because it is, whatever this contest formula is. So, if you work, like say Canadian provinces, it's worth a certain point. Each province is a multiplier. You take that total QSL count or points that you accumulate times the multiplier, and that's your final score. Now, one of the questions I had from one of our subscribers, Tim, that he wanted me to ask you particularly, and I think it was a good time to put that into the interview here, is around contest scoreboards. Like, for example, contest scoreboard online, I think is one of them. How important is that to, be, publishing from your logging software? We'll get into logging software later, but from your logging software out to a resource like that?
It is, I guess it's an operator's choice. It's not mandatory. It's the kind of thing where when we operate a K3LR, we put it up on the scoreboard. And I think a lot of people like to chase K3LR. So that's good. And we like to chase our competitors too. We'd like to know where we're standing. But it is not required for most every contest. I would say 98%, 99% of the contests do not require you to post to an online scoreboard. but they can be lots of fun. It can be lots of fun to see how you are ranking or how you're doing. Now, there is a downside. Maybe I'm posting and I'm not keeping up, or I had a radio problem or an antenna problem, or my wife called me away from the radio and my score is not going up. And it can be a little bit discouraging, but to each his own. There are some people that don't post to the scoreboard, but they watch the scoreboard. I think if I'm going to watch the scoreboard, I should be contributing as well.
And I have to agree with you there. I watch it, and I don't worry about what K3LR is doing, because I know I don't compete. I'm not in the same category as you. I'm usually a single up. But I asked, like to keep an eye. Okay, what are the other VE9s doing? There's a lot of contests, for example. I may not have the station to win all Canada, for example, but I could win New Brunswick, and I like to know. I like to know how I'm competing again or comparing to all my peers. And we get online and we bash each other back and forth on Messenger all the time. Hey, what are you doing? You're sleeping over there? We have fun with it. But and that's the thing about contesting. A lot of guys, Tim, take it seriously. Mm-hmm. I know you guys at K3LR take it seriously as well, but you also have to have fun with it. I'm assuming that there's a lot of fun going on in the shack there during a contest.
There really is. And I mean, that's the whole reason to do this, is that it's fun. Yes, guys are, paying for their own plane tickets to fly here. They're taking time away from their families, taking maybe vacation days from work as well. But the idea is to get together with, your ham radio friends, and all my friends are ham radio operators. So, when these guys come here for these multi-ops, and, there's single ops, like you're talking about, some of your operations are single ops, and then there's multi-ops where you can have one transmitter or two transmitters, or what in the category that we're in, unlimited transmitters, which means 6 bands. But the bottom line is we're having fun with our friends. And that's really what this is all about, hanging out for an entire weekend with your friends and then talking to your other friends on the radio.
Yeah, and you made a good point about guys coming in to participate in these events at the K3LR. What does that process look like? What's the selection process? Because I'm sure you get bombarded with people, hey, Tim, I want to come and operate. How do you choose who gets fill one of the seats inside the for, let's say, upcoming WPX?
So, what happens, Stuart, is basically it's a right of first refusal for the team that we have. There's about 30 guys that operate here on a routine basis. There have been over 200 people that have operated in the contest chairs here at K3LR over the last 34 years. That all being said, it takes a very strong contest resume to be on this team, and we're very proud of that. And, just because somebody is a great single operator does not mean that they're going to work in a multi-operator situation. This is a relatively small room. It's 30 foot by 30 foot, and we have 11 stations, so it's compressed and it's compact. And you have to get along well with people. You have to share. You have to be able to move multipliers, those sorts of things. Some of the operators here I've known for over 50 years. So they're very close friends. Some of these guys have operated here since day one. So they've been here 34 years. So it's a tough seat to get into, just because the core team keeps coming back year after year, Stuart.
Yeah, so I imagine when you're looking and you have a vacancy, you're really looking at the resume of their contest. One of the big factors that I've really started to hone in on myself, Tim, is just I call it the false positive ratio, right? Blown contacts or whatever, right? Looking at that metric and saying, okay, the Spanish contest last year, I had a very high percentage of what I call blown contacts, right? But I found out that it wasn't for my fault. It was that if one call sign only appeared in my log once and nobody else's, they disqualified that contact. So that's why I had a higher number, because being here and being that it's even the Spanish contest, it was still open up to contacts around the world. So I had the POTA guys, I call them, calling me because they wanted that POTA contact, but not showing up in any other contest log, and that contact was disqualified. Is that an important factor to you to look at that? What is their success ratio from what they submitted to what actually gets accepted?
Yes, we call that a log checking report, or the LCR. Used to be known as the UBN, but now it's the LCR. And most really big contests have these reports, and they are very valuable tools. And I never use those in a discouraging way, but it's understanding, well, here are the rules of the contest. If there are unique QSOs in some contests, they're thrown out because they say, well, maybe you had a cheerleader, or maybe maybe you really didn't work that person because they only worked you. That kind of a thing is a rarity. In the bigger contests like the CQ Worldwide, which I'm very familiar with, the unique contacts, as long as it's a viable call sign that you can find in the databases of QRZ or the FCC or FCC-like organizations outside of the U.S., if it's a viable call sign, even though it's unique, they're going to give you credit for it. But there are those contests, like the Spanish contests, some of the Russian contact. If you only have that one QSO, that unique, it can be thrown out. But what I look for when I'm looking at that contest resume of a potential operator is their LCR, how many busted calls, how many not in logs. Where I said, I worked you, Stuart, but I didn't show up in your log. And so, and that can happen for a whole number of reasons. And we're not looking to put blame on, but if you see a lot of not in logs by an operator, that means maybe he's not careful enough to make sure he's in the other station's log.
And that happens with me, Tim, a lot. It's I don't know what it is, but I find it with Spanish-speaking countries and some other European countries. I'll say Victor Echo 9 Charlie Foxtrot, and they'll get Victor Echo 9 Charlie Papa. And if I'm not careful and catch it, then I'll say, no, Charlie Florida. So they get it. I'm sure that's happened a lot where they just, for some reason, I don't know, it's just how I say it or whatever it is. They pick it up as Charlie Papa for some reason. We're working on fixing that one. But that would result in a not in log type of mark, right? Right.
And typically that's not a mistake on you. That's a mistake on the guy that you're working, because you said Charlie Fox. He logged Charlie Papa, which makes it a busted call on his end, unless the contest rules state that it has to tie.
Yeah. Now, getting into that, one of the discussions we had with Sebastian the other day, who writes the Ham 2K Polo software, he said, there's going to come a day when you have a lot of these short, like sprint type contests, 6 hours, 12 hours, and using artificial intelligence to score them and giving like instant scoring. Do you see that on the horizon anytime soon?
Actually, I do. I think that's going to evolve, and Stuart, you and I have seen a lot of evolution in this hobby. I remember it wasn't too long ago, there was no FT8. Growing up as a kid and well into my 20s, there were no computer logs. There were no computers, so we were logging on paper and pencil and the good old days. But with computer logging and the internet now, real-time logging and real-time scoring is a thing, and it is evolving. And I really do see that is going to become the norm very quickly here, Stuart.
Yeah, we see that already with organizations like the Worldwide Award, the month-long event in January, which either you love it or you hate it. There's one.
Oh no, I thought it was great.
Yeah.
Again, anything that creates activity on the band.
Exactly. But there's a segment of the ham population that kind of frown upon it, but those detractors are always going to be there. But they have their back end, because I was running VE9 Whiskey Alpha. Their whole back end is, as soon as you put a QSO, it gets sent off to their central server, and it's immediately processed, and you see your score in real time. So that's really nice to see. I'd like to see more of that, especially with big contests. That would be great to see, like WPX one day, having, the contest is over and within 48 hours the results are published.
And that is doable. That is really doable. And it's guys like WWA and WRL, that are pushing that, and a couple of others that are really pushing the online scoring. N0QQ operated here last week in the YLWWA, and it was a week-long YL activity. And who doesn't like to work YLs? So all the OMs all around the world will work. They worked 300,000 contacts between all the YLs during the week. And, and at the end of it, after 7 days, I said to N0QQ, who operated here, she worked almost 9,000 QSOs. She had the top score on sideband. I said, well, you have to send in your log. She says, oh, no, the log is there. It's all done.
Yep.
And how cool is that? You don't have to worry about a thing. It's already done.
Yeah, their logging back end is pretty. They use the ham cloud, which is very sophisticated, in my opinion. So we have WPX in a week from. By the time we're recording this, it's a week from this weekend. That's one of the big ones. You mentioned CQ Worldwide. There's a handful of other big ones. The new contester. What can they do to have fun and not get discouraged because the big guns are out there with their amplifiers? Some will say broadcasting, transmitting 6 kilohertz wide and knocking them all out. What can they do to have fun in an event like WPX?
Well, in an event like WPX, you can still have a lot of fun, even if you're not an experienced contester. You might go higher up in the band and, and just do search and pounce. And maybe you enter they do have a tri-bander wire category. So you can enter, if you don't have a big station, it's okay. You can run 100 watts. You can even run QRP and, enter the 5-watt category. So there's a lot of things you can do, but, back to that North American QSO Party and Stuart, when all else fails, field day. Field day at the end of June here in the United States and Canada is the best way to get started in contesting.
Yeah, I agree. I think one of my first contests was field day when I got back in. So I took 30 years off of ham radio to raise a family and start and run businesses. So I just recently got back into it, and I've had a keen interest in contesting dating way back to when I first was involved with amateur radio, Tim. So in order just to two last things before we wrap up here. If you had to give a new ham 3 tips to get started, you mentioned the North American QSO Party a few times. I imagine that would be one. But what would be a couple other tips that you can share to say, here's how you're going to maximize your enjoyment?
Yeah, so go to contestuniversity.com, click on videos, and watch some of the YouTube videos from some of those professors that are teaching that have great experience in contesting, and they're teaching about beginning in contesting. That's a great resource, contestuniversity.com. Another great place to go is the DX Engineering blog. This has over 1,000 articles in it on how to operate and set up your station, lots of basics, 1,000 articles on allbands.com. onallbands.com. It's a great place to go for that. The other thing is, if you have a radio club that is close to you, reach out to those members that may have some experience in contesting and or field day and get involved. Find an Elmer Find somebody that has been there, done that, and will hold your hand to get started in a state QSO party, the North American QSO Party, or invite you out to field day.
Awesome. Good tips. So to wrap up, Tim, I always ask this question to every guest. If you had your crystal ball in front of you and it was working perfectly, where do you see ham radio going in the near future and let's say 10 years? How's the hobby going to evolve? Is it going to change much? What do you see for the future of this hobby?
Well, I think it's going to change a lot, and I think it's going to change for the better. I think that we are going to find more innovative ways to communicate via this tremendous hobby that we have, to be able to use the airwaves and to be able to use the spectrum. I think you're going to see more things with AI, Stuart, and I think you're going to see more discoveries, more new things that are going to come that are going to make it easier for us to communicate over long distances. And that really gets me excited. And I think we're going to find that there's going to be new equipment, which is really going to be cool, that we will be able to adapt and have fun with, because, Stuart, and I say this all the time, this is the greatest hobby in the world.
And one last point, you mentioned something about new equipment coming down the pipe. And I imagine you have some ins on that because of your role with DX Engineering. One of the biggest challenges that I see, Tim, is, and I have it here, and I live on 5 acres, and I'm starting to experience, and I reached out to you a little while ago with some challenges I have, is just the amount of QRM that's being generated from, switch power supplies, 5G networks, you name it, whatever produces, spurious signals. How is the radio, the Yaesus, the ICOMs of the world, how are they combating that with filtering and stuff? Are there any new products that you can share with us that are coming out soon that can help combat that challenge?
Well, that's always going to be a challenge, Stuart. But the great news is, even some of the radios that we have right now, the DSP that is involved, the digital signal processing, and these software-defined radios handle noise and interference better than anything we could have imagined 30 years ago. So, and I think 10 years in the future, what that new technology is going to do, it's only going to get better and be able to fight the noise and the interference better. So hang on, things are going to get better.
Awesome. Well, with that said, Tim, I want to thank you for your time today. I know you're a busy guy, so I won't hold you too long. I'll look forward to working you next weekend on the WPX. I'll be Charlie Golf 9 Tango, which is a special event called honoring Alexander Graham Bell's first telephone call 150 years ago. So in Canada, we get special prefixes like that for special events that are 25-year increments. So I looked that up on the line and said, that's the perfect one, same, right in line with WPX. Last year I was XM9A, so just to give all these prefix hunters, because the WPX contest is just multipliers based on unique prefixes, right?
Yes.
So I expect to be busy 1 week's time from now, and I'm sure K3LR will be on the air for that one. Well,
it is one of the biggest contests of the year, and it's certainly, the activity is off the charts because there are a lot of people that like to collect prefixes and have fun and work their buddies on the air. So we'll see you next weekend, okay?
Absolutely. So if anybody wants to get a hold of you, Tim, for reach out for any questions, or just want to maybe come and tour the shack, how's the best way for them to reach you?
Yeah, you can go right to my website. It's K3LR.com, and there's an email button right there. And if you don't want to do that, you can just email me at K3LR@K3LR.com.
Perfect. Tim, thanks again for doing this, my friend. Appreciate it. And we'll see you next weekend on the contest.
Sounds great. 73, Stuart.
73, my friend.